Hello, everyone. Welcome back to yet another episode of WTH, right? So this is quite an impromptu episode with the new recent news of the Kurono chronograph launch, right? The Vermilion, right? Which is the piece that it's only exclusive in the Tokyo and Shanghai Saloon. Therefore, we've decided to find time to really talk about this particular watch, or more accurately, all the new Kurono Chronograph post 2023, right? Which is the new iterations of case with more if it's a better layer and breakdown of the particular case, right? So for the history of the audience as well, prior to these iterations of Kurono, as you can see from the screen, for those who are watching in YouTube, there is I believe, two other iterations of chronograph as well, right? Shiro being the last of it. And you would notice it's quite a bit of a departure and slash improvement with the previous iteration, right? I think one of the, being a owner of the Shiro as well, or ex-owner, I should say, the particular Shiro face a particular issue that they have a very, very thick case with zero bricks as well. But we'll talk more about it when we go into in-depth, right? But yeah, so essentially all the chronograph post the improvements of the case, we are going to grade them and give the respective scoring, right? Anything you want to add in, Woody?
I think they've made a great step going to the Mark II, and they've been quite consistent about this since I think, early 2023. And this is the new case. And we will speak a little bit more detail. The first one really, it had this thing about where we always say it looks great from the front until you turn sideways, right? But this one, the new versions don't. So that's where the versions that we're focusing on. And yes, interesting that they released this one. So let's get straight into it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And also probably put it out there as well. Woody and I are, I'm not sure if Woody still are, but I used to be one of the Kurono contributors. So there's definitely a little bit bias towards it as well, as I am a fan of the brand. But yeah, so just to factor that into. But ultimately, like we mentioned, these scores are very much a subjective scoring, right?
Correct.
All right, so diving into the respective criteria, right? So you know the drill. First thing first, is it worth it at retail, right? So in retails, as you can see, the price point is about 4,000 US dollars. It is relatively steep. Is there any other chronograph you could get at that price point? Probably, but being a owner of Kurono, I think one thing that I will really put it out there is that what you're paying is not just the watch itself; it's the entire end-to-end experience, right? Especially if you have not seen the unboxing experience. Sorry about that. But if you have not seen, usually the brand comes in this box and you would see a theme that goes into it. It comes with respective theming and so on. The one I have here, it's for the Grand Hagane. And there is a backstory of it as well. As you open it, you uh, you get the entire experience as Hajime Asaoka has intended for the particular audience to receive it, right? So you need to understand the vision of him and how the entire unboxing experience and ownership experience of a Kurono is. And you have certain details, like, for example, in the Grand Hagane limited edition, you have your name engraved in the respective box as well, right? Certain very minor details that us watch enthusiasts would like and enjoy, and you that sort of level of intricacy is not often available in most other brands where you just get a generic watch, everybody's the same and so on, right? And even when it goes from different colors, even though it's just a different dial change, a story is typically associated with it as well. I think it's more of like a Japanese way, as you can see with brand Seiko as well, which is all the nickname of that. That being said, if you factor in this uniqueness of experience that you're going to get, instead of just looking purely at the spec sheet itself, I think this is where you're going to get your money worth by owning a Kurono, right? And at least this is how I personally view a owning a Kurono, that it gives you this added thing, this added touch that is not just within the numbers itself, right? But ultimately, yes, looking at the specs itself, probably you would probably have a better watch outside. among the Swiss brands and so on, right? Even at retail price. So factoring everything, I would probably give it a 0.5, right? On top of it, because this is, if you factor in the new Vermilion iteration, you could only purchase that in either Tokyo or Shanghai, right? So that's uh, pros and cons. Pros is that you can feel that it's added some, you can have that unique buying experience directly via the saloon during your vacation. But the downside is that it's also harder for you to acquire, right? So yeah, depends on how you look at that. But yeah, overall it's 0.5 for me. Over to you, Woody.
So I think when you look at the market for automatic chronographs, I think the first thing you need to realize is it's running an automatic Seiko movement. So what's the closest parallel? Mechanical chronograph, automatic one from Seiko themselves will go for about 3,000 US dollars. So you're paying about 25% more for the Kurono experience, so to speak. So that puts it on a basis of where you go, like, there is a specialness to it, given it is by a master watchmaker, designed by one, although still mass produced. So there is a argument to be made there, albeit it's still a run-of-the-mill movement. It's not great, so to speak. I think you get better value out of the Sellita run ones, micro brands as well. So it depends on which lens you really take. So if you're looking at micro brands that have running a Sellita chronograph movement, you're going to get more value out of those watches who are also operating around the Seiko price. So you are paying that premium, but you're paying that premium knowing that there's that whole experience that James talked about. In full transparency, I actually denied myself that experience because I was abroad when my watch arrived and I needed to get the watch to me without the whole box and all that. So, bit of a shame. But having said that, there is that uniqueness, there is that experience. I think if you're going to deny yourself that, like someone else opened it already and then you don't even have the full experience, right? It's a bit off. It's like you might as well don't. But that's one of those things that we can get into afterwards as well. So for me, looking at the market, you can't get a big name chronograph for that price. Anything now that's automatic, that's a mechanical movement, is easily operating on a 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 US dollars. So there's an argument to be made there. But then you also need to look in relative terms. It's running a Seiko movement. Seiko themselves use a arguably newer version of that movement and charge you about 3,000-ish for newer or limited edition versions. So that premium is there. So for me, it's a iffy thing. It's a 0.5 for me for the retail price. Back to you, James.
Fair enough. Right. So moving on to the next particular criteria, which is it worth it in the secondary market, right? So looking at the price right now, on the lower end, you get something at about 3,100, comparatively to the retail price of 4,000. But let's say on average, conservatively speaking, you'll probably land at somewhere maybe around 3,500, right? At 3,500, let's just look at other chronograph, right? Let's just say if you are not like dead set on an automatic chronograph, if you look at some manual wind chronograph as well at the secondary market at 3,500, you could probably get a lot better or other better options available, right? And then when you look at it, like if you mentioned, right, you lose that particular first-hand experience of owning it already at retail, and then you compare it to a secondary market, you lose essentially both ends, right? You lose in terms of the specs shit, and then you also lose the experience. It's unless you really, really like it, I would say certain iteration of it's probably nicer than other. And if you really like those, you can't find it anywhere else but the secondary market. And plus point, it is cheaper versus the retail price. But that one is very much down to individual preference. For me, I would say 80% of the reason of the I purchase a Kurono, it's for the experience itself. Therefore, I would unfortunately have to give this a 0 over here, right? So yeah, over to you, Woody.
I think for me, when it comes to this, right, I like what you just said, James. You gotta really want it. And if you already made up your mind that you want it, and because Kurono tends to operate on this, like if you happen to get it at that time frame, then you get it. If not, you miss out, right? Even if you miss out, just wait and wait long enough, because I've not really seen I could be wrong, but I have not really seen this watch really operate very much above retail. There are people that ask above retail, but very often you will find listings that are going to be below retail anyway, at about 20% less or so. So my view is, if you really liked one of them, you missed out, just be patient. You're bound to find one in the secondary market for a 20% discount, and that's where you operate to get it. Now, do I think it's worth it? Iffy again, James covered all the points very well. So I'm being a bit more generous here. It's a 0.5 for me on this criteria, but your mileage will very much vary depending on how you evaluate this criteria as well. So highly subjective on my end, but 0.5. Back to you, James.
Right. Before you move on to the next one, I'd just like to add in a little bit more, right? Like I said, this is recorded as of August 2025, right? So Kuronos, if you have this topic 3 years back, they value all the secondary market value is all above retail price. So right now, with the market being extremely soft, we're judging it at this time and this date. So this is what it is, right? Will it go back up? Will it go back down? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but like I said, this particular judgment is based off as of August 2025, right? Anyways, back to the next criteria, which is aesthetics, right? So aesthetics here, it's, I would say Kurono itself, or Hajime Asaoka, creates one of the best dial across the range of the Kurono watch, right? There is probably only about 10-20% of the dial that I'm not really fond of in the entire catalog, but most of it I am extremely fond of, right? I would say the Shiro that I used to own is probably one of the nicest chronograph dial that I've ever owned, especially doing something white on white. It's very hard to get it done well, with it being really messy as well. Over here, what they have done, they have improved the case and how it breaks, how it looks as well. The white one that was released in this particular iteration was also really nice in my opinion. I would still think the Shiro looks nicer. It looks cleaner as well without that applied 12 and so on. But I would have to very much deduct points. The salmon one, I'm 50-50, but the new Vermilion one, I do think it looks pretty hideous, right? And bulk of the attribution for that is the logo. I really do not know why it went from a Kurono Tokyo logo with the kanji text on there down to a cursive Kurono. That seems to me like it just loses the identity of the entire brand, right? The big part of it is that iconic kanji logo right here, right? That really sells it to me, and it looks incredibly cool versus just Kurono in cursive. They even removed the Tokyo word out of it, right? And it just doesn't work for me. I really have no idea why. I can see the cursive Kurono text in the 34 millimeter dress watch that they did. I think see that is okay, that works well. But in every other watch, you do really need that kanji logo version of it, right? So in all being said, I would, as much as I want to give it a full 1 over here, I have to give it a 0.5 over here. But yeah, over to you, Woody.
So aesthetics is an interesting one. I consider Kurono a tale of two halves. Now, why do I say that? I think dial side, as James mentioned, if you look across its catalog, and I'm a huge fan of chronographs, they make some of the nicest looking dials, most balanced dials I can find on a chronograph watch. And without shortchanging any details, they leave all kinds of details on it, yet there's so much symmetry on it. Now, the challenge I have with the Kurono Chronograph is, even though the Mark II has done a lot to reduce the bulk of the case, it's more carefully hidden now, but you're still looking at nearly a 14 millimeter watch without things like what you find on, say, a Speedmaster, where you've got the cantilever and that offers a bit of a break in the side profile. They've done well to hide some of it, but really it's still a stodgy looking watch on the wrist. Because 14 millimeters with almost no bezel will appear like that. It's very difficult. You need to have a mid case to break up that a little bit more. And Kurono is trying to keep consistent with its cases. It's the same sort of case design that they go from the three handers up to the chronographs, and they just try and conceal where they can. But it's always a bulbous, especially when you look from the non-crown side, you always notice that. I am also not a great fan. I have to say this. I think whoever Hajime Asaoka is paying as a copywriter, that guy needs a raise. That guy or lady needs a raise, because every time I read it, I laugh. It's so over the top, the way it's promoted. And, it's like whoever's coming up with this, seriously, if you take away the veneer of the hype, it's not really that big a deal, but you can make such a big deal of the color and whatnot. So the Vermilion, I think it's okay. I actually like the Hisui, the jade green one with the white one. I think the salmon one, I'm also 50-50. I still think they haven't reached the heights of what James had before, which is the Shiro. The closest they come to is the Hisui, the jade one. And there's another thing that I also want to point out. This watch is best appreciated at arm's length away. Now, as a macro photographer, right, I tend to over scrutinize things even at this price point. And I have to say that you will find some flaws that are invisible to the naked eye, that only the discerning person will get annoyed by. And I'll call out one example, right? The date window always has a shadow being cast on it. It's almost impossible to read the date without a shadow being cast on it, because it's so deep inside, right? And it's so raised that, unlike date windows which you see, it's nice that they put a framing, but if you then compare to an entry-level watch with a date from a Grand Seiko, right, you will realize the difference. Much thinner border, very easy to read, hardly any shadow coming cast on it, but it doesn't appear like that on the Kurono. So for that, all things considered, I still give it 0.5 because front side looking at it, really nice looking watches. Not really a big fan of the Vermilion, but that one, your mileage may vary. But I tend to feel like if you're a betting person, almost every iteration that comes up will speak to somebody from purely a visual standpoint, not so much just because it's a Kurono. So that's why I'll go with it. Back to you, James.
Right. Before we move on, I'm just wondering if these instances, right, is it an issue with Kurono now playing it safe right now, where they have reached this amount of popularity, or if they run out of ideas, right? Because back then, the copyright for what they have done in terms of the Mori and everything, at least for me, when I read it, I was like, oh wow, this resembles certain forests and everything. It's like how I got wowed by why a snowflake is being called a snowflake, right? I used to like the lore of all this creation, right? But now it just seems a little bit lost. Perhaps maybe, I would say since 2023 onwards. But anything prior to that, I was actually very interested in all the lore of the idea creations of these watches. So what do you think? Which one are you in the camp of? Yeah.
So I think Kurono is in itself got a double-edged sword now, right? Before this got released earlier this week, I had sort of lost track of how many editions have come out since Yoshiro, right? And I was actually quite surprised to find that there have been 3 versions already, right? Including that Shanghai-looking one that we didn't put up an image for. And that doesn't feel like a long time ago. So I think it is a bit of a case where I do foresee that it's whether they are keeping a design that they may are waiting to just release to end the cycle already, because they've only just updated the case 3 years ago, right? And that's not a very long time in watchmaking space. But I kind of feel like the classic versions where they had to retire it, and you and I were both calling out for them to retire it as well, because it's like, how many color variations can you go before it becomes too derivative? I think they're at risk of getting there now. I know there's an effort to choose a color and whatnot, but I think we've been spoiled as well, in the sense that when it comes to most other watch brands, they release multiple pieces in different colorways, right, at the same time. And this one is a slow drip. And when you have a slow drip, you do give yourself the opportunity to upsell each one. But it could just very well be that I'm so immune to hype language, and so maybe I'm oversensitive, that when I read it, I go like, no, it's just a color. It's fine. You know, you don't have to say so much about it, right? Or maybe, truth be told, my reaction came from the Instagram post. I mean, when I opened the website to look at it, I can see there was a lot more effort to link the colorway and all that, right? But when I was reading the very first copy, the first thing that they described about it, I was like, wow, really? It's red paint. You know, I know you put it out in the sun for a long time, but it's still red paint. You know, who puts their sun out in the sun for such a long time anyway? And truth be told, have you ever put, let's say, if you own a Rolex Oyster Perpetual in red, yellow, whatever, do they even test it for like 30 days in the sun? I think no one cares. You know, it's like, so where is that coming from? I don't know, but it's funny. I consider it humor on my end. So I think it's a bit of both. I think it's a bit of the fact that their release schedule tends to cause a need to hype up a bit more. But at the same time, I think it's also reaching a point where we are expecting so much of them, right? That you want something more exciting than just a colorway. That's the way I look at it. I don't know what you think about that, James.
Yeah, I personally just hope that Kurono doesn't turn into the villain, right? So right now, it started off with the hero story, but what I meant by that is like, for those who do not know, Hajime Asaoka has his own brand, which is really self-titled, and his own personal watches, it's crazy expensive, right? It's like, what you're talking about, 30,000-40,000 US dollars kind of watch, like super indie, super expensive, incredible movement and so on. And it's sort of like the equivalent of how Max Busser created MB&F, right? So it has that similar origin story as well. It says that, oh, I do not just want to cater to this set of client who can only afford incredibly expensive timepieces. I also want to release my work and my design to the wider audience, right? But it come to a point right now, they are sort of tipping the scales. Is it still a passion pet project that you are indeed trying to give this to as many people as possible, or is it milking the market right now? I think they are sort of like in that particular edge that's tipping this scale right now. I don't think the conclusion is being met at the moment, but it's very close to ending up becoming the villain right now if they are not careful enough. So that's where I would place it.
Fair.
Right? Yeah. So yeah, we'll see where the future leads for this. But moving on to the next criteria, which is horological feature, right? So as Woody mentioned, it is, in terms of movement-wise and everything, it's nothing impressive, and that should be said, or it should be said for all Kurono watches as well. That's not where their selling point is, right? It's very much on the design language, the dial, and so on, right? So with that being said, I think there's nothing else to add, but I will just give it a straight 0 over here. Do not expect anything fancy. It is a movement they source, they put it in for an affordable price, and they focus on the particular design for you, right? Do I wish they do something more like MB&F to make a twist in it? Perhaps, but I think that's not what they're playing for, and I'm fine with it being what it is, right? So it's 0, but it's meant to be a 0. Yeah, over to you, Woody.
I think anyone who's buying a Kurono really isn't bothered by the internal so much. As long as it's a reputable movement, you're actually buying it for the design. If the dial speaks to you, the colorway speaks to you, that's what you're buying for. So it's not really a horological feature per se. It's a very established design language. I think in the initial days when the first case came out, first dial combination, maybe we would have given a score like that. But right now, where it's evolving into, there's nothing really to shout about. So you're buying for design, not for horological features. So it's an easy 0 here. Back to you, James.
All right. So now for wearability, right? So I think Woody touched on this quite a few times as well. The watch wears really, really, really thick, right? It is a decent size from the lug to lug and everything. And if you look at it from top down on your wrist, it does look really nice, like even from the previous iteration for the Shiro, right? So if I do a Shiro wrist shot and look at it top down, it looks perfect, right? The lug doesn't overhang and everything. But when it comes to the side profile, it protrudes out like nobody's business, right? And for this iteration, they improve it by having more bricks into the side case, so it doesn't look too much of a slab. However, there's only so much they can do, right? Because it is what it is. It still wears incredibly thick, right? And it's top heavy, right? So you do need to ensure your strap sizing fits incredibly well. Otherwise, it will just shift here and there. It's really, really top heavy, right? So that being said, I have to give it a 0.5 over here. Over to you, Woody.
So I think for wearability here, this is one of those watches that if you just look at a watch on paper, it seems to make sense. It's a 38mm watch, 46.8. It seems to be wearing well for most people. I think even the spec sheet is very cleverly written because I think it's a 11.7mm without the sapphire, but if you include the sapphire, it becomes 13.6. So the argument could be made that when you look from the side profile, it's not as thick as it looks. But I have to say that Mark II versions that even the Vermilion is now, they've made that improvement by cutting it further inside. But it's still something to be said. As someone who is very sensitive to wearability, there's actually a magic ratio when it comes to thickness, size of case, and also the lug to lug. There is a reason why the original classic Kurono works so well. Is that magic proportion. If you scale that up in any which way, right, and in this case it scales up thickness-wise mainly, you will notice it. It doesn't have that magic dimension anymore. You will still may be able to get away with it if you've got a bigger wrist and you don't mind that weight thing, because it's still on paper, still will wear fairly okay, and you might not be as sensitive as I am. I'll give it a 0.5 because of that. Very hard to find chronographs under 47mm lug to lug, under 14mm thickness, and in a 38mm case. But it's just that once you've tried it in person, if you don't feel sensitive to that, you'll like it. But as someone who has been exposed to so many watches over the years, you cannot unsee what you are already used to seeing. And I can tend to feel that this is one of those where, I'll be very honest, when the first Mark II came out, I contemplated it. But then when I started looking at where the changes were, I still hesitated because I still felt it was a bit too thick from just knowing the experience of how watches will wear. So I'll give it a 0.5, being a bit generous as I am. Yes, James did mention, I'm still a Kurono contributor, but that's as much as I'll give. Back to you, James.
Fair enough. Right. So before we conclude this, there's one more point I forgot to mention as well. In my own personal opinion, what I felt Kurono should have done in this iteration is to change it from a automatic to a hand wind. Right. I personally believe that losing the automatic feature and gaining a thinner watch, it's going to be a win in my books. I don't think people will complain, right? Even if you have to wind the watch and so on, right? I'm not sure if there's people will be like, I have to have it in automatic, at least not for me. So I'm not sure if I'm on the minority or majority, but I would very much prefer them to go the route of a hand wound chronograph movement over adding thickness just to fit in an automatic movement. Yeah, not sure if you agree with it.
That's a very good shout, because ultimately this is a brand that appeals to the enthusiast. And what happens is, as an enthusiast, I think I can say this fairly safely, most enthusiasts have more than one watch. And so it's likely they're rotating within 2, 3 or whatever it is, right? So having to wind the watch is almost expected. As long as you're not a one-watch person, you're almost going to always be winding your watch. So I find that that's one of the things that you use a very good shout. I don't disagree with you there at all, James.
Fair enough. All right. So that makes it to a total score of a 1.5 and 2. Yeah, it is what it is. I would like to give the brand I love a little bit more. But ultimately, I have to be true to what I believe in, which is, unfortunately, this is as high as I can give. And surprisingly, being a longtime fan of the brand, I gave a lower score than Woody, surprisingly, but it is what it is. I hope you guys enjoy it. And I hope you guys... I mean, if this helps influence your decision on the 22nd of August when this watch launch, good for you. But yeah, I can mention this watch is only available on the Tokyo and Shanghai Saloon, and starting sale on the 22nd of August. Limited production, I believe. There's not numbered. So yeah, if you like it, despite what we have mentioned, go for it. right? I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy, especially if you're able to purchase directly from the saloon. As an added experience, I've personally not been able to experience myself. I purchased all online. So good luck to you. But until then, we see you in the next episode. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.